probably take more chances, be a little bit more daring. Don't be afraid of failure as much.
Welcome to Thrivin in the Wild. I'm Taylor Stern. I'm sharing what happens when you step into your vulnerability, face the hard things, celebrate your journey, and giving you your weekly reminder that no one has it all figured out. It's time to thrive. Let's go. This is a very special episode, one that I know I'll always be grateful we recorded. Joining me is my dad, or known in formal settings as Jonathan Stern, but mostly lovingly referred to as Jonnyboy. When I am at my best, I'm my father's daughter, an incredibly hardworking, resilient man. He grew up to be his childhood dream of an airline pilot traveling the world. Recently, we got some tough news when he was diagnosed with leukemia. While we are still learning and processing this challenge, we knew that we wanted to share our journey here on this podcast, only with the hope to help others or encourage others to change their perspective with the hard things they face. Jonnyboy is also the one who named this podcast, which really seems fitting now, but he shares what the title meant to him. Something that I'll hold on to from this is what he thought of when he got the diagnosis. That wisdom is what makes him truly great. Take a listen. All right, Jonnyboy. So joining me on the podcast, because you have such a great radio voice as seen by the car mic videos. And
That's right. That's right.
That's right. Welcome in. You should do my intro voices.
All right. We're here talking to Taylor Stern.
It's natural for you.
It's just natural. It's fun.
It's natural. But you actually came up with the title of the podcast. And I remember I called you on the phone and I was telling you about the idea. And Alex had come up with some different names, but nothing really felt right. And then you actually came up with first Surviving in the Wild. And then we kind of all agreed to switch it to Thriving in the Wild. Now, Thrivin with an N because we're hip. And But how did you come up with that title? Because I was explaining to you what I really wanted it to be about as far as like understanding the hard things that no one tells you about and dealing with uncomfortable moments.
Right. Well, I mean, when you're talking about in the wild, basically it's life, as a young adult, say in your 20s or things like that, you're experiencing a lot of new things in the adult world that you probably didn't experience growing up in high school, college, things like that, where you were kind of protected, kind of insulated from the real world. So now that you're stepping out on your own, and I guess all people in their 20s, when they're stepping out on their own, it's akin to going out into the wild, where the wild is the unprotected life, the outdoors, I guess the real world, where you have to experience all those things that you may not have been akin to experiencing before. And
that's true. I never thought about that as far as, because you're right. Like when you're in school, everybody understands the isolation. You have a structure of where you're going, a general layout plan of like, okay, then I do this, then I do this. And then the wild is adulthood.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly what I, envisioned it being. It's not necessarily stepping out into the camping wild or, the forest, but going into a city or going into a work environment where you're not protected by either parents or colleges or high schools. It can be as if you're stepping into an unknown environment, a wild environment that you may not have dealt with before.
That's true. I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think it is a good, funny story of Jonnyboy. You actually went to a survival skills camp that taught you how to survive in the wild.
Well, yeah, it was called Outward Bound, and it was actually started by the British royalty, and I can't remember the exact year, but they used to send their kids and their, people would go out and do this, and it was kind of like a, coming of age sort of thing. And in the United States, it actually became a way to deal with troubled youths or people who were having trouble and wanted to kind of reconnect and get a feel for things that they could do if they felt like they were unable to control their environment or things around them. But in my case, it was just a way to kind of go out into the wild and to experience the outdoors and see if I could survive out there and maybe learn some new skills.
When did you do
And
that? How old were you?
I was 16 at the time. I believe 16 is the youngest you can do it. So that's when I did it. My brother did it before me when he turned 16. And he did
Survival
the,
skills did you learn?
well, actually, it was pretty good. We learned mountain climbing, we learned rappelling, we learned canoeing, we learned making our own food in the wild, what to carry to survive in the wild. We actually carried our own food and supplies and camped out for 18 days in the wilderness of northern Minnesota and southern Canada in the Boundary Water canoe area. Uh,
So that brings up a good point. Maybe that's why this is called thriving in the wild, because once you get those survival skills, which will be these episodes and the stories that and lessons that people are sharing, then you can actually thrive because you have the confidence that you can survive.
well, true. Yeah, if you know if you've been experienced or been exposed to certain things that you may not have been exposed to before, you learn that, hey, it's not as bad as I thought, or these are the skills I need to survive in this particular environment. And once you do that, once you're exposed to that, it becomes easier and you don't feel like it's such a alien environment anymore.
Yeah,
And you learn how to survive, learn how to use the resources that you have to
true.
make do.
All right. Well, right now we're in the wild even more than a lot of people realize because you recently got some challenging news about your health and it's kind of, rocked the whole family in a sense. And I'll let you describe it. But before we start speaking, I think it's important to say we are no medical experts, even though you play one on TV. You do. A
This is
doctor
true.
a
This
doctor
is
on
true.
television, but in real life we are not medical experts. And so anything we're talking about is coming from our point of view and it's just as raw and authentic as possible. And we also wanted this episode to be a time capsule of some sort because my dad will be on many times and we want to look back and think, "Oh, okay, this is a perfect example when we're learning how to survive and getting to how we can thrive in this moment." So that is
Absolutely.
the key here. So, Jonnyboy, without further ado, just kind of sharing where we're at with your health right now.
Yeah. Well, what it was is, I as a pilot, we have to take medical exams, flight physicals at least twice a year. And every 6 months we take these physicals, and they do a complete physical on us, make sure we're up to tip top condition. We get EKGs, we get blood tests, and then I also get usually a physical exam just from my regular doctor, usually once a year. And at this particular exam, the doctor decided, hey, we haven't had a real in-depth blood test for a while. Let's go ahead and do one of those. So she ordered a full CBC scan, and we did a whole panel of blood tests just to kind of get a baseline for future reference. And the results came back, and she took a look at it, and it turned out that my white blood cell count was elevated. And when I say elevated, I want to say the normal is around 13, and that means I'm not sure the exact number of or what scale that's looking at, but 13 is usually what they're looking at for the high end of a normal white blood cell count. And when mine came back initially, it was right around 18 to 20. So she was a little concerned. So we ordered another blood test just to make sure that the first one hadn't been an abnormality or just kind of an outlier. And when the second one came back, it was around the same. I think it was at 20 or 21. So she decided, hey, this is abnormal. We need to have this looked at. Let's go ahead and send you to a blood specialist just so they can, because they're more or they're used to looking at this sort of thing, and this is what they do. So at that point, blood specialists just happened to be with the Colorado Blood Cancer Institute. So we went over and talked to them, and talked to this particular doctor. I don't know if I can, give the names out or not,
You
but
just talk to a doctor there. Yeah.
yeah, doctor, and he took a look. We did order some more blood tests, but he said initially from what we were looking at, it gave indications of possible CLL, which is actually chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And he says this shows up normally or not normally, but usually in older adults, usually 50. to 65 is usually when this can, rear itself. And, we talked about some of the implications that that may have. And we again ordered another blood test. And this time we ordered some additional tests that would actually look for uh, differences in the white blood cells themselves. And that way he could actually get a better idea of what type of um, leukemia cells these could be.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, one point that I think, maybe this is my perspective of it. Well, you were finished, right? I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you didn't interrupt me. And I would say, obviously, if you did, because I can say that since you're my daughter.
That's true.
That's right.
So, when you first got that initial blood work back, that's when they'd already kind of made that assumption that this could be leukemia. And no one can see this, but I put leukemia in air quotes because we've now since learned that there are 4 different types of leukemia. And that's the interesting thing from my point of view is that, anytime you hear cancer, blood cancer, leukemia, you just kind of assume that there's one blanket version of it.
Right.
But and that's just my naive perspective of cancer. We've been very fortunate where we haven't had any types of cancers and knock on wood, no real diseases in our family. And so when you first said that, I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Everything felt
No, no, absolutely.
crazy.
Right. And actually, I'm just looking it up. It says there's 5 different types of leukemia.
Yeah, see, we
There's
are
the,
not medical experts.
right. And so there's the acute leukemia, which, then there's acute myeloid leukemia. There's chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which is the one we're dealing with, chronic myeloid leukemia, and myelocytic, myelomonocytic leukemia. That's a tough one to say. But yeah, these are just kind of a overview of leukemia. It says it's the most common cancer in children and teens, accounting for almost 1 out of 3 cancers. And most childhood leukemias are acute. Most of the remaining cases are acute myeloid, and then chronic leukemias are rare in children. So that's why I said it's one that shows up mostly in adults.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
Well,
these things that I'm reading off of are off the American Cancer Institute website, just so you have a reference.
yes, true. Very good. Very good ethics here on
Oh
Thriving in the
yes,
Wild
oh yes,
podcast. But one thing that was also unique was that just hearing the word cancer is really scary.
it
How did
is. It
you
is.
feel when you heard that? Because I feel
Well,
like you're the most calm person I know.
yeah, well, that's true. In fact, I think I've fallen asleep twice during our interview already, but I'm awake now, so I'm okay.
You're awake.
Yeah, no, no, actually, it was a shock. I mean, anytime you hear the big C word, it can be a shock, and it definitely makes you reevaluate what's going on in your life, how you've lived your life, what you can do in the future, and how this could affect your current situation.
What did you
It's
think of?
Well, gosh, what did I think of? I thought of my family. I thought, have I done enough planning to protect them in the case that this goes the absolute wrong way, and I'm not around in the next couple of years? And I said, okay. So I looked at that, and then I look at what's going on in the present. Can I continue doing what I'm doing now, my job? And uh, gosh, and uh, how is it going to affect others around me? Are they going to treat me differently? Are people going to treat me with kid gloves, or can I continue to live the life I've been living, up to this point?
Did you feel like people initially kind of treated you differently or weird?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you tell somebody that you have leukemia, immediately they go to the worst case scenario, and it's like, oh my gosh, you've got cancer, and they get that very pained look in their eye, and they become very sympathetic, and which is great, and I appreciate that. But it's like, and I don't know if other people feel this way, but most of the time, you just want them to treat you like they've always treated you, unless there's some real extenuating circumstances that would prevent them from doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very it felt like kind of like, when I first heard it and we weren't telling a lot of people. That's why I'm glad we can talk about it here so that more people understand and have a better viewpoint of how we're dealing with it.
Right.
Because it's kind of one of those things where it's like you really don't want to bring it up and be like, "Hey, guess what? Here's what's going on." But then you also feel like when people are talking to you, it's like, "Oh, if they only knew what I'm going through." You
Right.
know?
Right.
And that sounds very it's all very it's not meant to be selfish. That's not my point of saying that, but saying in the sense like it really is true. Like, you never know a battle that people are going through, ever.
That's true. And you don't know what they've had to do to, I guess, adapt to their circumstances.
Yeah. Like, and they've said this weird thing that, mom kind of holds on to is like, this is the best cancer you could get,
Yeah, I
which
know.
is
I
like
know.
such an odd phrase, but you do feel fortunate because I know that so many people aren't as fortunate as we are.
Right. And, the doctors, said that for the most part, they don't start worrying about this until your white blood cell count is usually over 100. And mine being 18 to 20 right now, it's very low. And he said, as far as the stage cancer, he says you're like 0 or -0 at this point. So, I mean, that was a very, reassuring thing in that sense to hear. He says, there's really no treatment that we're not going to treat this at this point. Mostly, he said we'd be monitoring it for, any kind of symptoms, or if the white cell, count starts to increase. And then we reevaluated at that time whether you would start treatment, and we'd take it from there. And even the treatment itself, it's mostly a targeted treatment now. He says they really don't like to use chemo for this particular type of leukemia. It's mostly a targeted, which goes after the proteins of the leukemia cell itself, or the white blood cell that's been changed, and basically interrupts the growth and how it reproduces.
Yeah, it's so weird. I took anatomy in high school and I'm sure they explained this then. I just wasn't paying attention.
Well, yeah, of course. It's when it doesn't affect you, directly, you tend to have less of a interest in the subject.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And that's what I was thinking was really important that we share on here because it's like you get this news. And then I remember thinking, like, I didn't want to bug you with questions because I didn't want you to feel like you were like, that's all we could talk about then. But then I also was like, okay, well, I'm just curious of it because I'm a curious person, obvious reason
Sure.
for a podcast here.
Right, right, right.
And so I started asking a lot of my close friends who'd had family members who had had some sort of cancer because at that time I didn't even know what this was going to look like and how you kind of prepare yourself as a kid, you
Right.
know, and like how you treat it. And God bless, some of these people I talked to, they had much, much more severe cases, and my heart really goes out to them. But one thing they all talk about is just staying positive. And I think that staying positive always sounds easy, like it's so much easier said than done. Everyone I talked to said, oh well, you just got to stay positive, be strong for them, all that. But I really don't know, how do you get to that point? Because if you really, I guess it's just almost, focusing on your thoughts.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I remember when it was like, okay, well, how do you stay positive? Like, this just sucks.
Oh, yeah. No, no, absolutely. It's hard. It's hard because you're trying to figure out, what your next step is going to be, and then how people are going to treat you, like you said, and I guess, like I said, what are you going to do from now on? Are you going to change the way you eat? Your behaviors? Are you going to be as excited about going out into the outdoors? Is it going to expose you to things that maybe you didn't, think about before? I mean, there's a whole number of things to contemplate. And for me, it was like, well, am I going to be able to continue doing my work? Because that's, I want to be able to provide for my family, and still, provide the lifestyle that we've had. And I know that's kind of selfish. I know a lot of people are going through some hard times right now, but you just want to, you get used to a certain way of life, and change is never easy.
Change is never easy. And luckily, we don't know that this will really change anything for right now.
Right, right. In fact, when I was talking to the doc, he said that this shouldn't, impact anything as far as what I'm doing currently. And I'm still in the process of finding out exactly what the next step is going to be with my employer, and talking to the union and things like that, and see what they have to say. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But
But you feel positive?
I do feel positive, especially since there's really no treatment at this point other than just monitoring. So it's like, well, that indicates to me that there's not going to be a big change in the way I'm living my life now. Maybe take a look at perhaps what caused it in the first place, and living a healthier lifestyle, maybe try to get, more greens and get all those good grains and things like that. And I
Yeah.
don't know,
Who knew that
but
food affected it so much? Also, I know we talked about talking about this. This is not a hereditary disease.
no, no,
Nothing.
yeah, he indicated that there's really no, I shouldn't worry about it passing on to both you and Alex or, anybody else in that sense. They said it was mostly environmental. In fact, one of the first questions he asked me is, had I been around fertilizer? And I thought that was an interesting question. But he says, a lot of people exposed to fertilizer tend to have this, genetic abnormality that can, start bringing about this particular cancer.
Yeah. So right now we are in the survival stages of this news, and but soon we will get to the thriving standpoint because we'll
That's
get
right.
more information and more
Right.
confidence in how we're moving forward with this. But I think that's an important step is like to get to thriving, you have to learn how to survive. And I think that we're learning that right now. So that's where we're at with this news particularly.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. Now, question though, where
Yes.
does this confidence, you are so authentically Jonnyboy,
Well,
where does that stem from?
gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it's just, I've always felt that, as long as you're prepared for situations, yeah, you're gonna be in a situation that may be unfamiliar and scary at times. But if you have in your hip pocket the basics of what you're encountering, you're gonna. It may take a little bit of a learning curve, but you're going to be able to overcome it. And I've
Mhm.
never felt that I was not able to overcome a situation.
Always,
Albeit,
since you were little.
yeah, always. I mean, granted. I mean, there's situations you can be in that are physically you're not able to do. Like I don't think I could go out and play professional football, obviously, even if I practiced all my life. I'm just not made for that. I'm not big enough. I don't think strong enough and fast enough. But, you can, in most situations, if you prepare properly and or have the tools to deal with that situation, you can usually, um, I guess, adapt to almost anything that encounter that you see or come in contact with.
That's true. That's true. Um, I like that because I do think that is the base of confidence is preparation.
Sure,
Some
sure.
sometimes. But you are so authentically yourself. Have you ever felt like you've wavered now? Because personally speaking, I do feel like my identity has shifted and at times I didn't know who I really was.
Okay. Um,
Have you ever felt that way?
yeah, I did. I think the first time I felt that way, well, there's probably been two times. The first time was when I was getting out of college or, getting close to graduating from college and trying to figure out, well, what do I want to do with my life? And so I had to kind of look back and see, well, what do I enjoy doing? Try to find my what is the word I'm looking for? My
Passion?
passion. Yeah, looking for my passion. And at that particular point, I found that I enjoyed flying. I liked the world of flying. I liked, it was a new sort of environment to be in, something that was, exciting and new and different. And so I had looked into it and I'd had a couple of rides in planes and I thought, man, this is something I really enjoy doing. And then I went out and I actually took flying lessons and took them up through the solo portion where I was able to solo. And that actually I did up in Canada, up in Regina, Saskatchewan, where I was visiting some friends up there for the summer. And so went through that, and it was quite a nice, quite an exciting time. And then I've also had, when I was in high school, I had the chance to fly in a P-51 Mustang, World War II vintage aircraft, and it just really cemented my excitement about flying, and that it was something that I wanted to do in the future. And so I looked in. I said, "Well, what's the best way to do it?" And I thought, well, I could go to the civilian way and take lessons and learn that way, or I could go into the military. And for me, the military just seemed like a better choice at the time. So I enlisted into the military as upon graduation from college, and went to flight school,
Yeah.
and it seemed to work out okay for me. It turned out I did have a pretty good aptitude for flying. I was able to adjust to it pretty well. Didn't have any problem with air sickness. being upside down and flipping around and things like that didn't seem to bother me too much, so it worked out okay.
So, did you have the need for speed?
Yeah, in fact, it was funny. There that movie came out while I was in pilot training back in
Top Gun
yeah,
for
Top
anyone who
Gun.
didn't.
Yeah, that's right. The first Top Gun, not the
The
second
first,
one. Yeah,
yeah, the
and
second one's really bad, isn't it? Like really awkward
I
and
have
weird.
not seen it. I honestly can't say anything about it. It looked pretty good from the previews, but I haven't had a chance to take a look at it. I think it was supposed to come out, and then COVID hit and shut down
Delayed.
everything. So I think they've
Yes.
delayed the release of it for a while.
Yes.
But yeah, that came out, and so that charged everybody up, and we were all pretty excited about it at the time, and it
And
was
there
fun
was
to see.
some very much resemblance of you and Tom Cruise at the time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and we are very close in age. I think he may be a year older than me, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
But
But you said there were two times, so that was the
yeah,
first time.
that was the first time. Second time, I would have to say, is when I was getting out of the military back in '98, and I was trying to decide what am I going to do with myself. It's like I had been trained in a very specific, um, I guess, what is the word I'm looking for again here?
I mean,
Niche or abilities,
industry. Yeah.
industry. Yeah, skill set is the word I'm looking for. I
Skill
was
set.
looking for, I was trained in a very specific skill set. And so I was like, well, I could try to get into the civilian side of things, the corporate market, things like that. Or I could go into the airlines, which would, in my mind, seemed more of a natural progression. Again, it was flying. It was still a very regulated industry and tended to, take advantage of my skill set at the time. So I went ahead and applied to numerous airlines at the time, got my resumes together and did all that, went through and got the additional training I needed to transition. Um, but things weren't really moving along at the time. It was hard. There were so many people trying to get into the airlines around that time that the market was a little bit flooded, and so it wasn't happening quite as fast as I thought it was going to. So I had to look into other options, and one of them turned out to be the FBI. And I had a friend at the time who was the lead investigator for the Columbine shooting in Denver at the time, and he was living in Denver, and I was in Albuquerque, and so
No,
we were
no,
able.
we were in San Antonio then.
Oh, you're right. You're right. That's right.
We
We
were in
hadn't
San
moved. We
Antonio.
hadn't moved to Albuquerque yet. We were still in San Antonio. But
Hmm.
he was a family friend from Albuquerque, and so we had I sat down and talked with him, and he kind of convinced me to go ahead and throw an application in and see what happened, because he said there was an aviation department within the FBI, and I think there's aviation departments throughout a lot of the federal agencies such as DEA, CIA, things like that. And so he says that
Interesting
my
that you know that. Alex and I will have to discuss that later because we have a strong theory that he's still in the CIA.
no, I totally
Wink,
disagree with
wink.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
okay.
right. No,
So FBI, you were progressing. You threw in your name in the hat.
right. Threw my name in the hat and went ahead through the application process, and it turned out I did pretty well. I was able to get through the entire process fairly well, and I was still pursuing the airlines. But this was, it was looking that this could be a possibility if for some reason I decided not to go with the airlines. And as it turned out, the day that I got a letter from the FBI saying that I had been accepted and would be able to go to Quantico for training, um, was the same day that I received a letter from Continental Airlines saying that I had been offered a preliminary acceptance into the training program. So I was like,
So
oh,
you had to choose.
so I had to choose. And at that point, having choices is much better than not having any choices. And it came down to what would be best for my family. With the military, I'd had to move many, many times over the 12 years, and I was at the point where I wanted a little bit of stability in my life. I wanted to be able to raise you and your sister in one location, let you, get a group of friends that you would, progress through school and life through, and then be able to keep in touch with for the rest of your life. I thought that was important as, both me and your mom felt the same way. So we looked at it and we said, well, with the airlines, yes, I may have to fly out of different domiciles, maybe New York, maybe Houston, but I could live in one location and just commute to wherever I was working. Whereas with the FBI, I would have to live in the city I was working out of, and more than likely to progress in the FBI, I'd have to move every 5 to 7 years. And so that's basically what the reason we made the decision and decided to go with the airlines at the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did, because just, last week, and, this will be coming out in November, but as we're recording this, just last week, dear friends of mine came over here who now live in Denver, but I made in Albuquerque because of your
Right,
choice. So I
right.
do have those lifelong friends. So
That's
thank
right.
you.
And it's very important. I think it helps with stability in your life. You can always look back and go, hey, this is where I grew up. These are the friends I made, and it always gives you kind of an anchor point.
Hmm.
A point that you can also, I mean, granted, you're not going to live, you may not live in that particular area your entire life, but it gives you an identity. It gives you a place to say, hey, I'm from here. This is where I grew up. These are my friends.
Yeah.
And I think if you're moving around, you still may make great friends and you may have great experiences from where you work. But for me in particular, I think it just works to
Yeah.
have a nice anchor point.
Yeah. So after San Antonio, we moved to Albuquerque because you were in the airlines, and
Right.
mom wanted to be close to where she was from,
Right.
Albuquerque,
To get
New
a
Mexico.
support system and
Yes.
yeah,
We're
have it
now
be
in
around for no
Denver,
reason. Right.
but that is another podcast episode, another time.
Down the road, we will talk about that.
Down the road, we'll
Yes,
hint at that one. So,
that's right.
okay, to wrap it up,
Okay.
what are some of your values in your life today?
Obviously, family is number one. What can I do to make the best life I can to support my family and gosh, so obviously family. Hmm,
I think hard work. I don't know if that's a value because you're very
I think it is.
focused.
No, no, I think it is. I think hard work is definitely a value. Whenever you approach something, give it your all, because if you're not, you're not getting the most out of it, and you're not giving the people you're working for, you're the best product either. And I always like to give people the best product. Uh, you know, give them what they pay for. And it's like if somebody's going to invest time and effort into hiring you or paying you to do a job, you know, give them, let them have the best product that you can possibly give them.
Yes. And that is true. I would love to be on your plane if that's your mindset.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the same with almost every pilot I've ever flown with. They're all very professional, very hardworking, very knowledgeable. I mean, gosh, I've never been around a group of more dedicated and professional people.
That's true. That's a very interesting. That's another conversation we could have at another point. The makeup
Sure.
of a pilot.
That's right.
Now,
Oh yeah.
one
Take a
thing
long time.
that I've told many people as I've started to get older, and it's funny because I actually was looking at my birth certificate today, and
Right.
it has "You are my father." If you didn't know that, but you're on the birth certificate. Yeah,
What?
yeah,
Good
you're
Lord.
on
All
there,
right.
and it
Okay.
said Jonathan Andrew Stern, age 28, which is not weird, but sort of weird because now I'm 28 and you were
Right.
28 when I was born.
That's right.
So we have different life paths, which is completely normal and good.
Right.
But you always used to tell Alex and I, make sure you are established before you get married. Why was that so important for you to instill in us, especially as women?
Right. I think, and I think that should be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, I don't think that you should have, everything laid out when you start a relationship, because in many cases you can't. It just doesn't work that way. But I think what I wanted is for you to have an understanding of what you were doing, what you wanted to do, and the path you were going to take to get there. You know, I look at a lot of relationships that people had when they were in college or in flight training, and granted, some of them worked out and they're very successful relationships, but for the most part, it seemed like those particular relationships eventually had problems. The people weren't able to devote the kind of attention that you need to devote to a relationship, especially when it's first starting out. And in my particular case, I never felt that I could give a potential partner or somebody that I was going to be with the rest of my life the attention and the focus that they needed, or or that I wanted. And so I felt it was better just to at least wait until you were fairly established in what you were going to be doing, so that you could you know I guess
Work
split
together, grow
work
together.
together, or your total focus didn't have to be on that, on your career. You could also focus on your relationship and balance the two.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Now, to wrap this up, what advice or what would you say if you could go back to 28-year-old Jonnyboy? What's one thing you wish you knew then that you know now?
uh, Probably take more chances, be a little bit more daring. Don't be afraid of failure as much. um, don't be I tended to be a little bit more introvert, more a little shyer than maybe some of my contemporaries. And I think I should have stepped out a little bit more, maybe um, you know been afraid to trip or stumble a little bit, instead of being totally trying to protect myself at all times, and you know be that guy who knew exactly what was going to happen. Maybe walk into a situation where I didn't have all the answers initially.
So you didn't have all the answers initially.
Right.
Well, then that is why you will be a reoccurring guest on Thriving in the Wild. And then maybe, down the road, we're not saying anything, but wink, wink, you'd have your own podcast.
Oh, perhaps.
Perhaps,
You never
because
know.
that could be, because now you've gotten to this point where you know how to survive, but now we have to figure out how you can thrive.
That's right. That's right. Especially in this changing environment that we are living in now.
Yeah, classic 2020. But it's good.
2020.
We're
That's
at a
right.
good point.
That's right. And
Yeah.
hopefully down the road, with the vaccine coming along, and hopefully the virus kind of disappearing down the road, or at least being controlled down the road, things will start getting back to some semblance of normality.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for being on this episode, and you will be on many more coming up. So,
Okay.
reoccurring guest is Jonnyboy. Send questions in on Instagram, and we will get them ready for Jonnyboy.
All right.
All
Love
right.
to hear them. Can't wait.
Well, thanks, Dad. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later. Take care.
Hey, are you loving this show? Well, I'd love to hear from you. Head on over to your podcast app, scroll down to where it says ratings and reviews, and I'd love to hear your thoughts with a rating and review. Your words might just be what the next person needs to tune in and turn their purpose into passion.